My brother slapped my daughter so hard she fell to the ground, and my dad laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. We were at Brad's brand new lake house in Wisconsin, celebrating the 4th of July with grilled burgers, corny music, and cheap beer. I thought maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. I grew up in the shadows of that same laughter. Brad was always the golden boy. Football star, straight-A student, the one my parents called our pride. Meanwhile, I was the shy, awkward girl who hid in her room with a book, hoping they might someday see me for more than just the disappointment. When I left home at 18, I told myself I'd never look back. But life isn't so neat. After college, I fell in love with Nick. We had Sophie, my bright, fearless girl who sang before she could even say full sentences. When Nick walked out, Sophie became my reason to keep going. I thought if she had family around her, maybe she wouldn't feel the emptiness I always carried. So, when my parents invited us to Brad's 4th of July party, I said yes, against every knot twisting in my gut. It started the way it always did. Brad bragging about his new promotion, his Tesla, his investment properties, my parents beaming at him like he'd cured cancer. Every so often, they'd glance at me, almost annoyed I was even breathing the same air. Sophie didn't notice. She just ran around barefoot on the lawn, singing her favourite summer camp songs, her voice bright and clear under the fireworks. Brad's eyes started narrowing. My mum called her too loud. My dad muttered that she needed to learn her place. Then, without warning, Brad stood up, stormed over, and slapped her so hard she collapsed onto the grass, and they all watched. I didn't scream. I didn't beg them to stop. I just scooped her up, held her close, and felt something in me turn ice cold. He thought I was weak, that I'd stay quiet, but that was his biggest mistake. When I carried Sophie out of that backyard, her small body trembling against my chest, I knew everything had shifted. Brad watched us leave with a crooked smirk, confident that he had restored order to the afternoon. My dad leaned back in his deck chair, cracking open another beer, while my mum started clearing plates as if nothing had happened. In the car, Sophie pressed her face into my shoulder, tears soaking through my cotton dress. I didn't try to comfort her with empty words. Instead, I held her tighter and let her sob. There was nothing to say yet. Back at our apartment, I laid her on the couch and iced her cheek. I looked at her bright blue backpack tossed by the door, the same one she had insisted on decorating with patches and glitter. It reminded me of her spirit, her wild energy, her fearless voice. And now, because of Brad, all of that had been silenced in one violent second. I watched her sleep that night, her breathing uneven, a small flinch every few minutes. That image burned itself into me, more permanent than any scar. The next morning, I texted my cousin Josh, "Do you still have that GoPro footage?" He responded within minutes, "Yeah, why?" I took a deep breath before calling him. He sounded hesitant at first, unsure if he should get involved. But when I explained what happened, his voice shifted. I heard the guilt in it, the regret of standing by, camera in hand, while my daughter got hurt. He agreed to give me a copy. I picked it up that afternoon. Josh handed me a small thumb drive, eyes down, fingers shaking. I thanked him, slid it into my pocket, and walked out without another word. Back home, I watched the video alone. I made myself sit through it twice. The first time, I barely breathed, my hands frozen on the trackpad. The second time, I took notes. Timestamps, audio cues, background reactions. My dad's laugh, my mum's sigh, Brad's proud stance. All of it documented in high definition. After that, I took Sophie to urgent care. The nurse gently examined her, asked soft questions, and filed an official report. The bruise on her cheek was still faint, but visible. Enough for a record, enough for proof. We stopped at her favourite ice cream shop on the way home. She didn't finish her cone. Instead, she stared out the window, licking half-heartedly. At home, she curled up under her blanket and didn't sing a single note all evening. That night, after she finally fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen and wrote a list on a legal pad. A plan began to take shape, piece by piece, slow and deliberate. First, the evidence. I uploaded the video to an encrypted drive, saved extra copies on 2 separate USB sticks, and hid them in different places in the apartment. Then, I printed photos from urgent care and tucked them into a sealed folder marked Sophie, July 4th. Next, I researched Brad's public life. His LinkedIn profile was a gallery of achievements: vice president at a well-known investment firm, keynote speaker for youth entrepreneurship workshops, donor for a local children's literacy program. So many smiling headshots, so many posts about integrity and family values. I opened a new notebook and started writing everything down. Names of organizations, board members, public contact emails, notes from his past posts bragging about his mentorships. I cross-referenced every community tie he flaunted. I read each sentence carefully, trying to understand the man my parents claimed as their pride. This wasn't just about punishing him. This was about showing Sophie that no one, not even family, gets to hurt her and walk away unscathed. Every morning after that, I played my part. I packed Sophie's lunches, kissed her forehead, and encouraged her to hum her favourite tunes, even if she wouldn't. I took her to therapy sessions, sat silently beside her as she hesitated to speak, then watched her slowly start to open up to the gentle psychologist. Meanwhile, Brad started sending me messages. Short, dismissive at first. "We good now? Don't make a big deal." Then, more pointed. "Don't you dare say anything to anyone. You'll regret it." Finally, full of contempt. "Nobody will believe you. You're a single mum with no stability. You want to go against me, I'll bury you." I didn't answer. I let each message sit, a digital trail of his arrogance and threats, quietly saving screenshots and archiving them in a separate folder. In front of Sophie, I stayed calm. We did puzzles together, watched her favourite baking shows. I let her braid my hair and paint my nails with shaky hands, trying to draw her back into the small joys she used to love. I acted like nothing was happening, like I was too weak to fight back, like I was drowning under his threats. But every night, after she went to bed, I stayed up until 2 a.m., drafting emails, editing video clips, reviewing local laws about child endangerment, researching privacy rights and community guidelines. I learnt which organisations had zero-tolerance policies, who their PR contacts were, which executive emails to address. I even found old press interviews Brad had done, boasting about teaching kids to find their voice. I re-watched those interviews, pausing on his face. How sure he looked, how certain that he was untouchable. In public, I let them think I was cowering. I knew that's what Brad expected. That I would tuck my tail between my legs, stay silent, maybe apologise for embarrassing the family. My parents never called to check on Sophie. Instead, my mother sent a passive-aggressive text. "Don't overreact, it was just discipline. We expect you at Thanksgiving." I read it twice before deleting it. I kept my replies short or non-existent. Every unanswered call, every ignored message was another quiet nail in the coffin of their false sense of control. I started collecting small pieces of my own power back, inch by inch. Every file saved, every screenshot labelled, every contact researched was a silent victory. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten him back. I didn't storm into his office or show up on his porch. I simply moved in silence, like water under a frozen lake, still on the surface but deep underneath, unstoppable. By the time Sophie started humming again in the hallway, soft and hesitant, my plan was almost complete. I had all the proof, all the leverage, all the time in the world. Brad thought he broke me that afternoon by the lake. He thought he could shut me up forever with one slap and a sneer. He thought wrong. He didn't know that while he celebrated his big wins, while he slept soundly in his expensive sheets, I was building something he couldn't even imagine. He believed I was weak. That was his biggest mistake. And he had no idea. I was just getting started. The day I decided to pull the trigger, the sky was a dull grey. It felt right, quiet, unassuming, the kind of day no one would remember. The perfect day to make Brad unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one Sophie and I used for puzzles and late-night tea parties. My laptop hummed softly as I opened each carefully crafted email draft. My folders were organised down to the second. Timestamps, statements, screenshots, medical documents, the GoPro footage labelled July 4. Truth. I started with Brad's company. His boss had once posted an article online praising ethical leadership and community trust. I attached the video clip, along with a succinct explanation. As a mother and a concerned community member, I believe you deserve to see this before allowing Brad to continue representing your firm publicly. I didn't embellish or dramatise. The footage spoke louder than any angry words ever could. Next, I sent a similar email to the Youth Entrepreneur Programme. Brad had bragged for years about shaping the leaders of tomorrow. I attached the evidence, asked them to consider whether this was the example they wanted to promote. Finally, I sent a copy to the Children's Literacy Foundation, where he had served as a board advisor, along with a single question. Do you trust this man to mentor children after seeing this? When I clicked send on that last email, I felt a surge of something sharp and electric move through me. Not rage, not relief, just a quiet, resolute certainty. I didn't pace. I didn't tremble. I just sat there, breathing slowly, listening to the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Sophie was at her therapy session that afternoon, so the apartment felt like a silent witness to my decision. It took less than 24 hours before the first signs of collapse arrived. Brad's company issued a bland public statement about ongoing investigations regarding a senior executive's conduct. His LinkedIn profile went dark. Comments piled up under his old posts. Is this you in the video? Disgusting. Resign. Texts started flooding my phone, first from Brad, then from my parents. Take this down now. You've ruined everything. How could you do this to your own brother? You're humiliating us. I ignored each one, saving the messages neatly into a separate folder labelled Aftermath. Every angry text was another thread unravelling from Brad's carefully stitched image. Bet tried calling, leaving voicemails where he switched from screaming curses to sobbing apologies. You don't understand. You're destroying my life. You'll regret this. Please, please take it back. I'll do anything. He sounded so small, so stripped of his practiced power. The man who stood in that backyard, confident enough to slap a child in front of a cheering audience, was gone. Meanwhile, news spread faster than even I expected. Parents from the youth program shared the footage among themselves. Sponsors of Brad's speaking events began pulling out, citing unacceptable behaviour. The Literacy Foundation announced his removal from the board within 2 days, adding, "They stand firmly for child safety and respect." Brad had always been good at controlling the narrative, but no amount of smooth talking could overwrite video evidence and community backlash. He showed up at my apartment building once, pounding on the door, voice muffled and hoarse. I didn't open. Instead, I sat on the couch with Sophie curled beside me, her small hand wrapped around my pinky finger. We watched cartoons at a low volume, while his muffled shouting echoed through the hallway. Eventually, building security escorted him away. He left behind a few shattered illusions and a trail of meaningless threats. Days turned into weeks. Each morning, I watched Sophie slowly rediscover her voice, humming softly while brushing her hair, quietly singing to her stuffed animals, It was cautious at first, fragile, but there was a spark. As Brad unraveled, my parents turned their frustration on me. They called me ungrateful, vindictive, a family destroyer. But their words felt hollow. Each insult only highlighted the gap between us, a canyon that could never be bridged. I didn't fight back. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on building something real with Sophie. We painted her bedroom walls a bright yellow, planted herbs on the windowsill, and started a scrapbook of happy songs she liked to collect. In private moments, I filed final police reports and added supplementary statements to the Child Protective Services record, ensuring that, even if charges weren't pursued, there was a permanent record of Brad's violence. One day, Sophie asked if she could join the school choir again. I said yes, my voice shaking only slightly. She practiced her song over and over in the living room, her clear voice echoing off the walls. Brad lost his job officially 3 weeks after the emails went out. His speaking invitations dried up. His reputation, once spotless and celebrated, became a cautionary tale whispered at board meetings and charity events. He was forced to sell the lake house to cover legal fees and hush up personal scandals that surfaced after his public meltdown. His friends started to distance themselves. His network shrank overnight. When the final confirmation came through, an email from the board chair of the Literacy Foundation stating that Brad was permanently barred from any children's programs, I sat back and exhaled fully for the first time in months. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I simply closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to Sophie's room. She was lying on the floor with her colouring book, music playing softly on her little speaker. I watched her for a moment, marvelling at the quiet strength in her tiny frame. The girl who had once looked at me with tearful eyes and asked, "Was I bad, Mum?" was now singing again, fully and without shame. That was my real victory. I reclaimed more than just power. I reclaimed our peace, our dignity, and our future. Brad didn't just lose a job or some public admiration. He lost the illusion that he was above consequence, that he could break us without a second thought. As for my parents, I stopped taking their calls altogether. The final message I sent them was short. You chose him. I chose my daughter. We're done. I didn't block them. I wanted them to see us move forward without them, to watch from a distance as we built a life defined by love and respect, rather than fear and silence. Months later, I started teaching a local workshop on community storytelling, helping women share their experiences without shame or fear. My old boss at the marketing firm offered me a managerial position, impressed by how I had navigated crisis and held my ground. I accepted. Not because I needed the validation, but because I finally believed in my own voice. Sophie sang at her first choir recital that winter. When she stepped onto the small stage, she looked directly at me and smiled. I knew in that moment she felt safe, she felt seen, and she knew she was loved without conditions. I walked out of that auditorium with my head high. Brad had nothing left but his excuses and his bitterness. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I just watched him lose everything he thought made him powerful. And me? I gained everything I never knew I deserved. He thought he broke me. He was wrong. Months after the storm had passed, I found myself standing on the balcony of our small apartment, a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands. The sun was setting beyond the city skyline, the orange and purple streaks washing over everything like a quiet promise. Life had shifted in ways I once thought impossible. I'd accepted the new managerial position at the marketing firm, but on my terms. I set clear boundaries. No late-night emails, no constant availability, no apologies for being a mother first. It felt like slipping into a skin that had always belonged to me, but that I had only just learned to wear with pride. Our apartment, though small, had turned into a sanctuary. Sophie helped me pick out new curtains, light yellow with small white flowers. We repainted the walls together, her laughter echoing as she accidentally left smudges and handprints. I didn't scold her. Instead, we called them our joy marks, reminders that this space was truly ours, unpolished and alive. Every Saturday we visited the local farmer's market. Sophie would run from stall to stall, humming as she picked out peaches or flowers for her room. She held my hand tightly as we walked home, her voice rising again in snippets of songs she once feared to sing. Sometimes she would stop in the middle of the sidewalk, tilt her head up, and belt out a verse to the sky. I stood by, smiling, letting her feel every inch of her voice stretch into the world. Brad was gone from our lives, completely, absolutely. His downfall was so thorough, so clean, that there was no room for him to crawl back. My parents' absence became another silent room in our mental house, no longer echoing with guilt or longing. In therapy, Sophie began drawing bright, wide-open landscapes. When Dr. Keller asked her why there were so many sunbeams, she simply said, "Because I'm not afraid anymore." That's when I knew we had crossed into a new chapter. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. In those quiet pages, I wrote not about anger or revenge, but about growth, the small victories, the soft mornings, the way Sophie's breathing steadied in her sleep. Some days I still felt the tremor of the past, a stray thought, a memory of Brad's hand raised, the echo of my parents' dismissive laughs. But instead of drowning me, those moments passed like shadows over water. They reminded me of where we had been, not where we were going. I found a local women's writing group and began sharing bits of our story. Slowly, tentatively, I started to see that my words weren't just scars on paper, they were seeds. Women came up to me after meetings with tears in their eyes, saying, "I thought I was alone." I realized then that there was power in vulnerability, in telling the truth even when it shakes. There was power in owning the narrative rather than letting it own me. Sophie's choir recitals became our new rituals. I sat in the front row, camera ready, but more importantly, heart open. Watching her step onto that stage in her small blue dress, shoulders back, chin lifted, felt like watching a miracle unfold in slow motion. When she opened her mouth and her clear, sweet voice filled the auditorium, I didn't just hear music, I heard freedom. I heard the breaking of chains that had stretched back generations. People sometimes ask me if I hate Brad, or if I regret the destruction I caused in our family. The truth is simpler and sharper than either. I don't feel hatred anymore. I don't feel regret. I feel nothing at all. And in that nothingness, I found peace. Because hatred is still it's still energy, still connection. Indifference, on the other hand, is liberation. It's stepping out of the arena and realizing you never needed to fight in the first place. I learnt that protecting my daughter meant not only shielding her from physical harm, but also from the insidious lessons of silence and self-blame. It meant modelling what it looked like to stand up, to say no, to claim space without apology. I realized that love is not quiet compliance. Love is fierce. Love is drawing the line. Love is saying, "You will not treat me or my child this way. Not now, not ever." If you're reading this, or listening, and you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, I hope you know it does. I hope you know that the small, shaky decisions you make in the dark, to save a file, to write an email, to take a breath instead of yelling, are acts of courage. I hope you know that there's a world on the other side of fear. A world where your laughter doesn't echo back as judgment. A world where your worth isn't decided by someone else's comfort or approval. A world that belongs to you. I don't need validation from the people who failed to protect me. I don't crave their forgiveness or understanding. I only need to look at Sophie's face when she sings. I only need to feel her small hand slipping into mine as we cross the street. Her voice soft but certain as she asks, "Can we sing together when we get home?" Yes, always yes. I no longer measure my days in losses or betrayals, but in soft moments, a cup of tea sipped slowly, the weight of a book on my chest before bed. The warm rush of pride when Sophie hits a high note without flinching. We built this life from the ashes. Carefully, stubbornly, beautifully. I'm not the woman I used to be. I am softer in some ways, sharper in others, stronger everywhere. I am not a victim. I am not a fighter. I am simply free. And today, I smiled, not because he lost, but because we finally found ourselves.